We are jumping back today, guys, into a new CG render. Today we're going to be jumping in on a Game of Thrones shot. Gotta get my shortcuts down here. This is the render we will be doing today. So that's what we're going to do. And as per usual, we're going to do this inside of Blender. So I already loaded up kind of like a bit of a scene with a cube and whatnot. I'm going to set up my viewport display right here. We're just going to set the pass through just so that we can get our camera here. And then as usual, guys, we're just going to go ahead and set up our scene and get everything kind of lined up. I think, you know, for me anyways, I felt like I was very productive. I just wish I did set up like a streaming thing that I could have done in Georgia. It's just, I don't know. I just felt like it wasn't the correct setup. And then every time I thought I would have time to do stuff, I just didn't. It was like there was always like something to do, even on the weekends. I'm going to kind of set up the wall here, which we're mostly just going to use a cube right now for lining everything up. It's just get the placement of everything down. Move that further away. And honestly, a wall is so easy to model. You just have to like, it's basically just a cube, which we'll use a displacement map on later. Just stretch that all the way over to the other side here. Guys, look, I already modeled the whole wall. Look at that. The whole wall's already finished. Flatten this out a little bit, or make it a little bit thicker. And then, yeah, I mean, let's see. Let's grab this, and for the most part, this will be like the area in which the elevator system is going to be at. I'm kind of just placing it there for the location of it, more so than anything, and then we can kind of clean up a lot of the details and add in a lot more stuff than before. Let's move this down. I'm just going to create like these thick kind of like beams that are going up. To be fair, this is probably really thick pieces of wood here, right? Let's scale everything down. If we Alt-S scale it, then we can scale it just like inward like that. Okay, let's go ahead and take this thing. We're going to duplicate this over here. Now, does this need to pop out? I feel like it needs to... So we have two sections, because it's the whole elevator width, basically, is how the elevator shaft is. So we have these guys here. Let's just move them out to roughly there. Should be fine. And then let's take everything, and then we're going to duplicate it inwards towards the edge of the wall here. I almost want to duplicate this whole thing, and let's move that down. The same thing here, so that way we got a bit of back wall. I think that's what AI is doing, and that scares artists that work on big teams, I think, more than it would scare me, because I already do a lot of visual effects as a solo operator, and if you're doing that, then I think like that's not going to really, you know, change too much of your workflow or my workflow. If anything, it allows me as an artist to do bigger, better stuff on my own time, which I kind of like personally. Okay, so now we got like this, like kind of like wood, like pieces that are going all the way up. I almost want, before that array happens, let's try this. So this is duplicating it every like 73 on the Z. Let's add another array in before any of this happens. And got 0. We're just going to add that second piece here. And then now we have to just change our distance on this guy. Something like that could be fine. And then we'll just remove the excess top. Or if we keep 14, what was the distance? Let's try something like that. So now it's like we got these two chunks that are going all the way up. But no, I love Nuke. So I used to be in After Effects main was like the software that I used. And I changed that back about 3 years ago. And did not look back. I think Nuke is just so good. Like the power that you have using the software. I'm going to bevel some of this real quick. We'll do... Actually, before we bevel it, here's the problem. What we need to do is I'll duplicate this whole thing, and then let's just... let's duplicate this whole thing here. I'm going to scale this slightly up, just ever so slightly, not by a lot. We'll call this a bool value here, and then let's select this cube here, and then add in a boolean. And we're just going to select that boolean there, and then apply it. So now our boolean we can delete. So now we just got like this other cube here. But the great thing is now if I select this guy and we bevel everything, just bevel it ever so slightly, it'll bevel up against that edge. And so now if we take this and then we bevel this, it'll bevel that edge as well. And so now we've got both of these kind of like, you know, pieces of wood bolted into each other like so. And then we'll add in another cube as well that we can just paste our rotation on. But yeah, they were looking for someone that looked roughly the same, like, you know, size and stature of the person because they were going to be under a blanket and they didn't have a dummy. So I was the dummy. which I didn't realize that's what they were trying to call me. They were saying I was a dummy. No, it was just fun. And it's not something that I usually ever get to do. So I was like, hell yeah, I'll do that. Let's just duplicate this thing over to this side here. That's pretty cool. So now we've got that, and then let's just duplicate this on the, or rotate this on the y-axis like so. And that should kind of like line up all the edges to whatever the board is. So there's one bolt, and I guess what we'll do is I'll just duplicate this over here, and there we go. So now I got 2 bolts on all the sides of the wood. And then once we do this, we can actually add this into like a collection, and then, or as a single object, and array it upwards, I think. Oh, do I need to apply? Yeah, let's apply all transforms. And now if I add an array in, oh God. Well, the Z still works. That's fantastic. I don't know when I'm allowed to start sharing that, mostly because this isn't my film, obviously, so I can't just go out there and share whatever I want. I know a lot of this stuff is going to be shared on some different like news articles and whatnot, so I think another easy way of doing this would be to add in a few edge loops to get roughly the same size at the top of the wall here, and then subdivide that. Oh, whoops, one more thing. Do the same here. Mostly what we want is like squares throughout, so you got like a square here that's roughly the same size as the square up here. And now if we subdivide everything, it'll all kind of like create squares on both the top and the side of roughly the same side. Let's add a new material in here. I'm going to add in, let's see, clouds is what I want. And then let's go into our displace, and then we'll select our new material texture that we created over here. I shade smooth everything. That should be a little bit better. We can change the strength of this to be whatever we want. But overall, this is going to kind of give us our huge wall texture that we have. And we can change the scale of this to be whatever size we want it to be. We can go into our editorials, our edit settings here, and then just turn on this proportional editing. And like I can grab stuff, and like if we just move this down a little bit, let's just grab this and just gonna scale that up a little bit. Now we're gonna get like a little bit of chunks here, so don't want it to be too perfect. Let's go ahead and add in a landscape now. I'm gonna move this a little bit closer to the camera here. Maybe scale everything up and then scale down on the Z axis. Just kind of move that a little bit over, and this is all going to be out of focus for the most part. The other thing I might want to do is just make them a little bit sharper. These things tend to be a little bit low poly. So if we go ahead and subdivide that a little bit more, and then we add in a displacement modifier afterwards, let's hit new. It's going to be using a new texture that we're going to create here. And this new texture, let's go ahead and just select something like clouds again, probably. Just change the size of the clouds to be extremely small. So if we just set that to 0, that should work. And then if we go back to our modifier, we can change the strength of this to be a lot smaller. So let's do like 0.01 or 0.03. For the most part, I think that works really well. Oh, this is going to also be out of focus, so it's not like we're really going to be paying attention all that much to this area here. But I do like to have that detail on the actual physical objects of it. And yeah, let's go ahead and over here, let's add in an empty with the plane axis. Totally fine. This is going to be over at our, area in which we're going to build our elevator here momentarily. Let's load this for the elevator here, and let's start creating that. I want to create the panels on the front of the elevator. Let's just build it to roughly the scale of a person. Here's our person. The person's going to stand inside our elevator. Let's go ahead and look at our elevator here. So we're going to have like a piece of wood on the bottom that's kind of like the ground area. Let's go ahead and do that. Just add that in there. We'll just change our rotation here to roughly the same rotation. Let's change this to be roughly the correct scaling. Well, let's see. That piece of the wood, does that go in front of the elevator or behind? Well, I guess the whole thing is actually supposed to be smaller. Something like that, maybe. And that should be fine like that. Do I have to apply the transforms first? I guess I could. All transforms and then bevel everything? Yeah, there we go. And then for the most part, now we just have to build out the front and all the pieces here. I'm going to actually make this its own object here. This will make everything a little bit easier. And if we go to wireframe, I could just select this whole top piece here. And then let's move this all the way up to the height of the elevator shaft. I'm going to take this whole thing here and then duplicate this to the other side. And so now we got ourselves a little bar. Go ahead and add another modifier in here and add an array. Let's add a third one in here as well. Just kind of like line all this stuff up. There we go. I'm actually going to add a fourth one in, and then we can just scale everything down roughly to about this size here. And we'll just do the same thing over here. I think it's 3 on the outside. Yeah, it's just 3 on the outside, so we'll do 3 and change the distance in the scale. And then this one here, let's just add another array in, and this array we can just move it all the way over here. This is all the same size, so we just need a 3.5, 2, 5, 3. There we go. Now we got bars on all of the windows here. Let's go ahead and save that. I'm going to duplicate this all the way to the very top here and just kind of move that over. We're just going to duplicate all this stuff backwards here, line it up. I'm going to take this whole thing here and let's just select all of the sides and the bar and like everything. We'll select the back as well. And that piece, if we move everything, it's missing the bars back here. Perfect. And then the ground. Now if we shift select this object here and then we'll say object keep transform. Now I can move this entire elevator just using our lovely object, our lovely empty. Okay, let's take this piece here. Just going to duplicate him. And let's just take the whole sides of this one piece of the wall here and then just move, like have it go all the way up because we're not going to have like, you know, windows on the sides here. So now I can just take this and then we can just duplicate these guys over. So I've got like all this paneling, and I could have used an array for this as well. Actually, probably would have been smarter for me to do. But now if I take that and I scale that out on the x-axis, voila, now we've got like this whole side of our elevator door. And if I create an array on the inside here, set that to 0. Okay, we'll select that bolt there, and I think we need to scale it down a little bit, but we'll move it outward just like that. Great, and now we can just make our life a little bit easier with like an array. So now we've got like this kind of like a board on the front. Probably want to do the same thing with some bolts here, honestly. So let's just take a bolt. We're going to go ahead and create a new mesh, a new bolt. Scale it down. And then again, we'll just create the rotation in here. Paste that, and then just rotate everything 90 degrees. And we're just going in, adding in some details. Stuff that we'll never see because the camera's so dang far away. Let's put some chains below this thing. Let's go ahead and save that. Just have some chains kind of like hanging out below it. Easiest way to do that is just add a torus, which we can rotate the area in which we want it. Scale it on the z-axis. Let's just rotate this, and we're just going to go straight down now with this thing. Also, if we go to top view, we can just grab it and rotate this around to our liking. Basically, we're just creating, you know, different pieces of rope that are getting pulled all the way to the top. Let's just grab this whole thing and move it up roughly about that height. And then let's grab all these chains here. There we go. We want this to be roughly about that height. So now we can start building out a little bit more of like the kind of platform that goes up to it. I'm just going to add an array in now. And then, honestly, 1.01 is probably pretty close to the size we want it to be. We want a little bit of a gap, but not too much. If we do 1.1, that's way too big of a gap. So 0, 1. So now we're just going to build ourselves like a nice little bottom platform for like where this wood or the bottom of the elevator is going to be. I think we have, like, we're building basically this thing over here. I'm going to duplicate this guy. Let's duplicate him. And then let's delete the array. And then I'm going to scale everything down on this to be a lot smaller. I'll just rotate this 90 degrees here. Just kind of make the stairs on the front end here. Let's add another array into this thing, and then we'll set this to 0. And 1.01 is the go. And we'll grab this one and nice walkway. And again, I think an easy thing for us, I always like to do this. It just makes everything a little bit easier. But if I scale this down on like the x-axis and then on the y-axis, and I scale this by 1.8, and again, we'll just scale it down just for our purposes. This is the height of a person, roughly, for us. So now that'll give us some context for how tall our beam should be. And I suppose we could do some of these like X things. Let's do that. Take the X, duplicate them, move them over. Awesome. We just created that. Let's create the wall here for like the castle in which that's going to be at. Add in another cube. Add another cube in here with correct rotation. Scale this one up. And we're just rough. Let's just lay it out, right? Like, we're not going to do any high quality modeling here. Let's just get the rough details built in, and then we'll go from there. And this is going up to like a guard tower, is it not? I mean, we can't really see it, but it is. So if we just duplicate our platform that we already created, let's take this thing and we're just going to duplicate him, and now we've got our whole self roll over there. Voila! Now we've got ourselves a nice little platform at the very top. Might have to adjust some things, but overall, I think that's good. Let's just scale that out. Fantastic. Let's get some pillars up here with some railing, I think. Perfect. So now I'm just going to duplicate the sides here. See how this is a lot of copy-paste work, guys? Like, once you do it once, it's, you know, nothing crazy. Well, I suppose we could do one more array, right? Just one more array. And let's piece that out like over here. So we'll do a negative 1.01. So now all I have to do is select all of those pieces, and then we can just line everything up like that. So now we just need the railings for everything, which probably won't be that hard. We just need this guy. Let's duplicate it, move it over, remove the mirror, rotate 180 degrees. I will add a mirror, but this time we're going to mirror against the stairs here. Okay, great. That's that whole side piece of the walkway there. I think if we grab that now and then we just extrude it outwards. Let's grab this face here, and then if we say cursor selected, and then we go object, set origin to 3D cursor. And then if we just mirror this guy, let's make our life a little bit easier. Let's grab this whole section here. We're just going to delete the vertices. Let's grab this whole section there. We'll just fill it in. And we just fill that in as well. And now we've got like ourselves a bit of a gate. Great. And so now I'm just going to mirror this whole thing so that way it happens on both sides of the gate. Okay. And then that's going to be the platform on which everybody is standing on. And those will all be windows. So let's work on the roof now, or the top piece of the roof. Now, if I just extrude this upwards, let's just do it that way. We're going to extrude this. Let's create a piece like that thick, and then we'll extrude it upwards and then scale that inwards like so. Awesome. Just have that go all the way to the top. And what do they have in between it? Oh, is it just that's all under the surface? So now all I have to do is just go in and add an array. Just line that up a little bit better. There you go. Okay, so then that's how you do a roof, I suppose. I kind of want this. Let's just grab this and just make it slightly visible on the roof. Because I got into Blender because it had a game engine in it. And at the time, I really wanted to do game design. So that was what I did. And obviously, I mean, a little bit of stuff has changed since then. I now work in the film industry and, you know, I do that professionally. Okay, that'll be the front kind of gate of this whole thing. We could add in some details too, honestly. We could add in some boards. Now we've got ourselves a window that goes all the way through on both sides. But we still have our modifier of our mirror in here. So if I do this, I'll just do a Boolean, and then we're going to do the Boolean before the mirror. We're going to apply it on the cube. And then now, oopsies, if I apply that, hit delete, we've got ourselves a window. And the window is on both sides of the tower. Now, the cool thing is, I can also just keep the cube here, scale it down, keep the cube there, keep the Boolean there, and then scale that down to whatever size I want it to be. And it will change the location of the window procedurally. So now I can actually grab this. Now I got two windows. I think I like the default the best for this particular rock that I want to do. And I just basically want to line up the bottom here. I'm just going to add in new additional rocks. So all I have to do is just go here to another rock. And overall, just kind of like creating a bit of a rocky base to this castle structure that we got. We're going to want to add a modifier in here. So let's add a displacement modifier into the ground plane. And I'm going to make sure it's a new texture. And that new texture is going to be clouds. But this will be our own clouds that we didn't have before. So we could change kind of the scaling here. Okay, with that though, let's go into our file here and scale everything down a little bit. And change the scaling of this to be a little bit smaller. Let's add in a subdivide surface as well, and we'll do that before the displacement happens. What kind of materials we're gonna need. So lots of kind of like stone materials and then wood materials, I think, is really what's gonna help us out here. So let's go to Polyhaven Textures. Let's add in a mountain now. So we'll just add in a landscape, and we'll just scale that guy up. Now this mountain, we're not going to see. It's going to be off camera. Something like over here. Okay, so with the sun like that, I can rotate it, and what we're going to want is a little bit more shadow for everything. And there we go. So now we're going to have like kind of like that top of the mountain catching the light a little bit. Let's go ahead and organize some of our stuff, because you'll notice we got so many objects inside of our collection here now. I think the first shading we're going to want to do is this big wall, because that's going to change a lot of how the rest of the environment looks based off of what this looks like. And then we can kind of work our way down the wall into the actual castle area. And let's do a vertical split here and then go into shader editor. But we're going to go ahead and start adding in all of our materials here. So we have our diffusion layer, which we're just going to drag that over here. We have our displacement. We're just going to drag there. Our normals, our roughness, and our translucent layer, which I'm not going to actually use the translucent material. So the first thing we can do is we can add our diffusion in, and that we can already see what it's doing. Now that's using our UV for our objects. And we can actually change this to be generated if we want it to be. So that way, if we have any UV issues, we can actually generate it to be on the object, or even the object sometimes works even better. But I'm going to be using UV. My only concern is that the scaling is completely off. So if we change our value to be something higher and plug that into scale here, we can adjust the amount of basically layering that we're going to be doing for our entire object here. The other thing that we're going to want to do is we'll go into edit mode on this object, and then make sure you select everything and say Smart UV project. If you've got very specific UVs that you want to grab, then I would do it that way, but this is very basic. Plug color ramps into this thing. You're going to see how much tiling that we have. Now we don't want that much tiling, so how do we get away from that tiling? Well, we'll just look at the displacement, so that way we can see exactly what we're doing here. I'm going to probably use, we can do this manually. There are add-ons that can do this stuff as well. But I'm going to just do all of this manually. So first of all, let's look at a noise texture here. If we drop in a noise texture, we can create a pattern on the wall that is procedurally generated. And so I'm going to use this noise texture to allow us to have different vectors in different areas. So if I use a color ramp on top of that, we can, just tighten this up a little bit. I actually like the amount of black that we have there. We're just going to make sure that the white value is a little crunchier. And so that way, now we have A and B versions of the same texture. So if we go look at this again, so now we have our displacement that's going to be tiled everywhere nonstop. We can take this whole value and we'll do a mix color. I'm not going to use a mix shader. Instead, I'm going to build out an entire material here. So we'll just plug this into roughness. So let's just view our principal BSDF that we have here. And then we'll turn this into a normal map. And then we'll plug our normals into the color of that, and then plug that into our normals here. And then our principal BSDF should update based off of that information. One of the things we can also do, by the way, is that we can add in a color ramp and change the black value here to be a little bit brighter. Let's do like a mix color here. And so if we mix this on top of some blue, so taking this color ramp here, and then taking, I think, a mountain texture that we had. Let's use this as our displacement. And I'm thinking we add in a new texture coordinate afterwards. We'll use this with a multiply of like a higher value just to get that rock texture on there. Let me take the normals of this and then actually use this. So if I take the same vectors and then I plug this into our normals here. Oh, and then I need to take, actually I need to plug this into our normal map and then have the normal map plug into normals. And then this is just our vector information for like the rock material, not the ice material, because those are two separate textures that we're using. I want to take the black lines and I want to make them white. So that way it's got a little bit more of a glisten on it. I want to see if maybe there's a way to like use this as a paintable object. So let's try this, because I think because of the massiveness of this object, it needs to be hand painted. So if we go in and say we add in an image texture and we say new image texture and we say 824 by 8024 is what I want to do. 8024 by 8024, something really large. And it's just going to be a big black kind of material here. And we'll call this rock roughness 01. Let's create a new image. And we're just going to view that image on our material here. And then we'll go into texture paint and hand paint what we would like to see. we now have this big black material basically on this wall, and we can hand paint this to be whatever we want. You can see over here what the UVs are in relation to the actual object. And so honestly, if we just drag our paintbrush over here, it's just going to hand paint using our paintbrush onto this object over here. And then we can use that later inside of our shader editor to get exactly what we want. But when we hand paint, you'll notice that it's very bland. Right? It's not, you know, high quality. It's basically like the most basic kind of like material. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into this thing, and then we're going to create a new mask, a new texture mask. And there's a bunch that we can import. I actually have like a bunch of default ones already in here. I was just going to say hit new. I'm going to hit new. We're going to go over to our new texture that I just created over here. And we're going to call this rock imperfection. And from our rock imperfections, we're going to change this to image or movie. I went in and I created a new texture. Let's just double check to make sure I did this correctly. I hit new. It's called texture 3. I'm going to go over to my checkerboard over here, and I'm going to select texture 3. And then on my selection of texture 3, it's got image or movie. So now we're going to hit open. And I've got a surface imperfections pack here. You guys can grab this as well. It's over on the Patreon. But this is going to have all sorts of different types of imperfections that you can use. So I'm going to find something that works really well for this particular object. Let's do, actually this residue one looks pretty good. I might actually do this residue one. Hit open. And so now I've got like this residue texture that we've got going on. And all I have to do is find that roughness material that I had earlier. And under this ice wall here, I'm going to paint onto it. Let's make sure that my settings are correct over here. I'm viewing rock roughness 01. Now all I have to do is go back over to texture paint. And then we're going to hand paint using that new texture that I just loaded. So I loaded in texture 3. Make sure under texture that this is actually deleted. We don't want anything on texture. And so now if I go ahead and paint, you'll notice that it's painting with a texture. The problem is that it's all over top of each other a little too much, and it looks like I am basically painting or like tiling it way too fast. So what we're going to do is select rake here. I'm going to select random, and then I think that should all be good. So random angle, just scale it up a little bit. Now we're just going to paint in from whatever angle we want. I could probably just use this camera angle over here. We're just going to paint in the area in which we want to have this rock material to exist. And there you go. That is pretty nice. So now we're just viewing that roughness itself. We can actually plug this without any UV like object changing or any of that crap. We'll plug this directly into our actual principal VSDF. So if we go view our principal VSDF, it's pretty much blue, just kind of like everywhere. But we have our own roughness that we're going to be using. So let's plug this guy all the way up into the roughness of our object. And once it does that, that's pretty nice. You'll notice that there's quite a bit of slickness inside of the ice as well. I'm going to kind of use this actually for the overall kind of like blue material. So let's do a mix color as well. Plug that in all the way at the very top here. I'm just going to make that very white. And then if we plug this roughness that we just created directly into the factor of that, it'll multiply that color, the areas that we want it. Rather than having everything kind of blue, we're now going to get in some white in there. So all we have to do to adjust how much of that we want to see is we can add in a color ramp and just plug that in right after that. And now these dark kind of like displacement maps that we're getting in here, that's all coming from this guy. So, that's all coming from this multiply here. The less that value is, the less our displacement is going to be overall. So we can actually lessen that by just doing that. We can actually get rid of it completely also by doing that. I don't know that we want to get rid of it. We might want to have something in there. I'm also thinking that the overall scaling of like that snow, that's looking pretty good there. Let's go ahead and let's just delete that. We'll keep that clean. Our displacement that we have though, we can actually use this to multiply other colors on top of it as well. So that's all going into our displacement that we have. Let's see, let's add a color ramp in, and then we can use this in conjunction with another noise texture if we wanted to. Drop that into the color ramp and then, you know, increase that and then make it a little more contrasty as well. So we'll do a mix color. Let's see, let's grab this guy and then let's make it black wherever it's not. And let's use a math node also, and then use this to multiply it to get a smaller value maybe. Then overall, now we're going to still get those streaks in there, but they're not too overt. And then overall, let's see, let's change the slight metallicness to this just to give it a little bit more of like that kind of like wet, icy effect to it. And then we're going to want this whole ground to have a material as well. So let's go ahead and add a new material here. Call this ground. A lot of this is like the scale is just so massive that, you know, we might need to make some adjustments accordingly. So the value here, let's just make that a little bit larger for the scale of it. Now, this is just the ground texture. We're going to want snow on top of the ground. So we will need to do that. Easy way to do that actually is by adding another noise texture. And we're going to change this to the Musgrave option, which is change the FBM to our terrain option. And if we view that, we can see how much is going on here. So we need to have a good amount of snow. And then we'll make sure that this is like a color ramp. And let's just multiply the white a little bit more so that way there's not so much gray. And then we're going to take this. We basically want to take our snow material. So if we create a new principled BSDF and we take all of the materials that had to do with snow. So let's go back over here to our snow texture. And we're going to find the diffuse, our displacement, which actually we don't need right now, our normals, and our roughness. And we plug that all into this new principled BSDF that we have. Let's add a normal map in. Plug that into that. Plug that into normals. And then now, with this color ramp, let's do a mix shader this time, using this color ramp as our FAC. And this is our secondary material. We can plug this guy into the bottom shader, and then this guy into the top shader. And that should give us two different materials to play against. One will be the snow that's going to be on top, and then the other, which is going to be the stone that is underneath it. Let's also add in our own coordinating system. So we'll just add in a new texture coordinate with a mapping, and then a new value node we can plug into the scale here. And that should change the overall amount of tiling that we have. So let's do that for both the displacement and the roughness. So now after our mix shader, it will only have the snow in the areas in which we want the snow, and then the stone in the other areas. So let's go into here. Let's change this to hue and saturation, and then let's go view it. We're just going to view this directly. It makes it a little easier for us to make our adjustments. We don't have to wait for as many things to computate. And then change our saturation, or well, our hue value here is all we really need to change, and we're just going to try to find the green hex. Okay, so this ground that's here, we're just going to duplicate this material now. And then after it duplicates, this will be like our foreground mountain materials, and we'll just call this FG Hill. And this stuff is just going to plug directly into surface. Let's go ahead and add in a normal. If we just add in a normal, and then we go in and we add a texture coordinates, I think is what we could do. Let's see. If we just grab this guy, we just basically want a texture coordinate is all we really want. Okay. And if we take this and then we go into here and we do, let's do color or mix color. We're going to do, instead of mix, let's do something like I think if we do difference, and we plug this normal into A, and then this normal into B, into the factor, and then we set that to 100%, what we should get is only the stuff facing like a specific direction. So let's use a hue and saturation here, and then turn that all the way down. And if we do a color ramp, we can get somewhat of a snow coming from the top of the material view. So we're going to use that to mix between our different values that we have here. So we already removed the saturation or the hue back to 0.5. I'm going to make the saturation here like a 0.3, maybe less. If we go view this principled BSDF, this is our kind of like rock texture that we just created. Let's go ahead and use this new normals as our FAC. So now if we go view our principled, our mix shader that we have here, we should have all of the snow on the top, and then we should have dirt on the sides. So we'll be doing that instead of using our noise texture that we created earlier. We're going to be using our normals to basically be pointing it in the direction that we wanted. So let's go back and enable our FG. I'm going to use a decimate to basically cut this down. Yeah, you can see how high res these are. It's like when I click on them, it just takes forever to load. Let's get rid of our subdivide for our first subdivide surface. I'm going to actually keep this last subdivide surface on. Everything else will be disabled. And I'll do the same for all of this. And I don't know. Personally, I kind of wanted it this a little bit further towards the camera. Let's first work on the mountainous material here for this guy. I'm going to just unwrap everything. Just make sure that we've got a good clean unwrap for our material that we already have. So, okay, now that that's unwrapped, now we can see that actually works a lot better. I'm going to make sure that I do the same to this. Here we go. Let's do an unwrap. Let's take this guy. Let's go to top view here. Kind of wanting some snow to come in, and right now we're not seeing any snow whatsoever. I think I have way too much blue in here, and we're going to have to like really clean that up. Yeah, I used a little bit of 3ds Max, but I don't know. I've always just been a Blender user, and I don't think that'll ever change. And well, like I don't never say never, right? I feel like with a lot of this kind of stuff, it's like you use what you're comfortable with, and then obviously eventually I'm going to probably need to swap over to something else, because the way softwares work is they really come in, it's like fashion, you know, they come in, they go out, you know, and then eventually I'll find myself into a situation where I am going to need to use, you know, more than likely Unreal Engine is the next big boy on the block. But yeah, I want to make it more magical. Okay, so that's where all of my snow is going to be. And I'm basically using a normals with the actual normals of the object. And then actually anywhere I rotate this, I'm going to get the normal direction on, so I can find something that works a little bit more to my liking. Thinking this will do just fine. It gives us like these edges to the little mountains here. So as long as I've got that, I can then use this as a mask through my mix shader here. My mix shader should be taking two different values. One is the snow value, and the other one is the just the mountain value. So this is the snow value right here, and then this is the mountain value right here, which is just kind of, I want to make it a little bit darker. I think that's the other thing. So let's change the value here. Okay, so I think, what did I just do here? Cycles. Okay, that's good. I like that a little bit better. We're going to add in all of this smoke inside of our compositing. I don't want to have to deal with that inside of Blender. I feel like it's just a bit much to add in all that smoke inside of Blender. I think the ground is pretty flat right now because it doesn't have, it's kind of like overall like shading changes that are happening as well. And I kind of want to do that. So easy way to kind of configure that is, let's select our ground first of all. And let's take a look at this. So we've got our mix shader node, which is our final output of our kind of like shader setup here. And I want an overall adjustment to this shader. So if I disable this, kind of like darkens everything overall a little bit, not as much as I'd like. But what we can do is we can actually create a whole new principled BSDF. And I'm just going to make this a bit darker here. Let's see, I'm going to also use a noise texture. Okay, let's disable displacement real quick. And ideally here, what I'm trying to do is create big patches in the ground. They changed my node setup though. Let's see, let's swap that over to 2D. Okay, that's a little bit better. I'm trying to get that Musgrave, which now they swapped inside of the noise texture. It just makes it, I feel like, more complicated because it's this way, but I mean, hey, whatever works for them, right? So now we've got this principled BSDF here. What I'm going to do is use a mix shader between the darker version of the effect and the lighter version. So if we just connect this to the top one and then this to the bottom one, and I use this as our FAC, should be able to go view that real quick. We will get darker kind of like patches throughout wherever the white areas are inside of our map. Now, if I change my scaling here to something like that, should be fine. Then I'm just going to add in a little bit of a mapping node so I can move this stuff around inside of, I don't think Z is the correct solution, but let's do that. So now we're going to get kind of like our lighter areas and our darker areas will be right here. Now again, if we go view that, we'll have our darker areas kind of like coming in and creating patches throughout our entire setup. And that's going to give us kind of like a little bit more of realism rather than having so much just like non-stop same detail being repetitive over throughout. I need to go to get some action VFX assets. I'm going to import this as images planes here. Okay, so now we can import this like smoke like this. And the great thing about this is because smoke is just, you know, black and white image, all I have to do is, you know, use the white aspect of this for the alpha. So I'll just go and plug this into the alpha here. And so now we have our smoke. I'm actually going to unplug it from the base color because we can actually use our own kind of like texture of whatever color we want. And then the only thing that we really need to do now is use a color ramp. and this will allow us to control how much alpha there is on the smoke. I'm actually going to use this for base color as well, because sometimes it gives us some pretty nice textures. Okay, so that can be our smoke now. And now we've got it kind of like peeking in from around the corner here. And of course, now we get to just play with adding in a little bit of smoke into like the different areas. What I love about this is using this in 3D. We can really just stick this kind of like wherever we want it. Just as long as we don't see edges, we should be fine. And then this one, we can create a whole new material. Let's duplicate this material here, 0.01, and then we can make it a little bit less transparent. But I think this will do for right now. Let's see, anything from overhead? A little bit. Let's go take a look at that real quick. I like this one. Fog lingering. Stick this all the way over here, and then let's go ahead and import image as plane again. Now we've got like this kind of like smoke. I almost want it peeking through the other side of the wall here. So if we just, you know, do some duplications here, just rotate that. And then honestly, we'll do the same thing in front of the tower as well. Kind of wanting this to not cast any shadows, so I might have to make some adjustments to the settings as well. And then this one, we'll just duplicate it. I'm going to use a color ramp on the alpha of this. Actually, no, let's just keep the color the same. But this one's just going to be a little bit more visible. So let's just disable shadows, because we really don't need shadows based off these planes. I'm going to use a RGB curves here for the top bit of this texture that we're using for the smoke on the bottom here. I want it to stand out a little bit more. So I might just do base color adjustment here. What you can see is we're kind of just bringing this up a little bit, so that way the fog on the ground is a little bit brighter. I'm going to take one of these planes that we have here, and then I'm just going to duplicate it past this mountain area-ish. And if I use that, I'm going to create a whole new material. Just make it really, really white. Oh, well, there's my camera, so I got to scale that down, move this up, move it in front of everything. And then if I take that, I plug this into our render output here. Also, I'm going to take a look at adding some lights inside of our building over here. But yeah, I mean, I do freelance as well. I've done a bit of freelance. I like to keep myself busy, so I kind of work during the day and at night, you know? Let's increase the brightness here for this window. I think the problem is that it's going to light up everything inside of this house, so let's find the appropriate brightness for what I'm trying to do. And then let's add in a cube and just move that over. I'm just trying to get this one window. I don't want any of the other windows to have a light on. So if I just have this one window and then we delete this face, only the face, then we're going to light up this specific area. Now, maybe a little bit of leakage will happen, but that's not the worst thing in the world. Might make it a little bit more yellow because it kind of makes sense to be somewhat yellow. Let's just grab this whole thing. We're going to duplicate it and then just move it over to another room. Okay, I think that's a decent amount of spreadage for the lights on the front of this without, you know, being too much. And I also think it looks a little bit more realistic having some of these other windows have a little bit of light coming through them. I'm going to get into doing some of the wood texturing here because that's going to help out a lot. Let's see, let's use building material here, and we'll just first of all throw a darker texture on it. And then I'm going to go over to good old Polyhaven. The biggest softwares that are being used right now are Maya, Unreal Engine, and you know, Blender actually, surprisingly so, is getting more and more usage in different studios. I still don't think Blender is a quote-unquote industry standard, but yeah, I mean, I think Maya, for the most part, is being used quite a bit more. So it's like 3ds Max and Maya are pretty close. So like, I'll be honest, if I were you, if you had an option between the two softwares, because they're both Autodesk softwares, then I'd probably learn Maya. It's used quite a bit more than other softwares are in different studios, especially if you want to work at larger studios. I'm gonna smart UV project this. I just feel like those softwares are so freaking clunky. That's my biggest problem, honestly, with them is how clunky they are. The other softwares I would probably recommend is Houdini. Houdini really is kind of like the other future of like just what everybody is using. Also just an incredibly powerful system. I kind of want it to be a little bit brighter though. So if we throw in like a curves, I think that'll help us out. Honestly, it's pretty bland. I might add a little bit more variation in the wood. Let's do that on Let's do that on these guys. Maybe these guys are different. So we'll do that's building. Let's call this unpainted. And then in our building unpainted, let's just drag over our materials that we've got. So I downloaded this new worn planks material. Do displacement, normals, and our roughness. And then yeah, I mean it's the same thing. So just base color. Plug our normals here in a second. Got our displacement. Need our roughness, and we need a normal map this as well. And now we just need the vectors. Just want the exact same value so we don't have to worry about scaling differences between the different pieces of wood. But yeah, now we could just use this as our vectors throughout everything. I do need to like smart UV project everything though, so let's just do that real quick. The other thing is if I add in a light over here, let's do this. Let's go light. Let's do a point light. And then let's just increase this intensity by quite a bit. I don't know how much I need to increase this intensity by. Just trying to see a little bit of like light come off the buildings on the inside here. And maybe the best way to do that is actually artistically drive this. So let's use a area light here up onto the buildings. If we increase this brightness now, we'll see this kind of happening here. Should see this on the front of this building. So just increase this brightness all the way. And then yeah, now we're kind of seeing that happen. What I want to do is create a bit of a glow on the inside of this encampment. And yeah, just kind of do that. And then a little bit more yellow. And yeah, let's go ahead and just add some textures to this whole thing. So I've got our basic building material that's going to go all the way up. And then all of these crosshatched sections, let's just make those a little bit lighter. And then same with these, we're just going to make those unpainted as well. The only thing I'm concerned about now, let's just apply all of our arrays here. So I'm going to select this entire elevator. We're going to use a bit of force perspective because I just feel like this isn't as tall as it should be. We're going to select everything here and we're just going to join it into one object. Same with this, join it into one object. And now if we go into edit mode, I'm just going to select the vertices at the very top of this elevator. And all we have to do that is just select these guys. Boom. Go back to solid view here. Now the idea is that everything is going up very straight right now, but I want it to feel more force perspective as if it's getting smaller as it's going to the top. Because this wall is supposed to be quite a bit larger than I actually have it right now. So let's do that. We can do that by just enabling our proportional editing right now. And if I just start to scale, you'll see our proportional thing kind of come in. I'm just going to scale this guy up. And all I really want to do is scale it to this right there. Let's go to top view real quick. Need to center that a little bit better. And then we're just going to scale to the 3D cursor. And then when you do that, now it feels like it's getting quite a bit smaller as it's going up. Let's add in area light here. Gonna kind of grab that. And let's just add in like a fill kind of light section here. If I scale this whole thing up and then kind of increase the brightness on this whole thing. Just kind of create like a bit of a fill light that's gonna get some of this shadow. I don't really want the specularities to be caught, so let's see, let's disable that on glossy. Diffuse is fine because that's just going to brighten everything up. Let's do that, but I'm gonna change the intensity of this to be quite a bit less. Just a little bit of fill light that we basically want to have come in here. And I'm gonna make this a little bit more blue as well. And then I do want to change maybe the overall hue of it. So let's go into our world settings here. Actually, another easy way to do this, I just realized this might be actually a little bit easier, is if I use a mix color and then change this value to a blue value and then just do a plus. This will allow us to get kind of a little bit more of a blue color that's coming in through the sky. Kind of wanting some darker areas in here though, so let's see. Do a few things for that. I'm going to use a spotlight specifically. Just kind of like point that in this direction. What I'm trying to do is we will use a negative value and then kind of like suck out some of the light in like a specific area. We'll go to add in a... What I'm trying to do is have a bit of a fall off to our square that we're adding in here. I want to have a shadow, but I don't want to see hard lines of that shadow. Scale it down a little bit, move that over here. And it's mostly I'm trying to get that shadow on the wall back here, but I don't want to see a hard line where that shadow is. Now, what we can do potentially as well Yeah, I think this might be an option. Let's add in a new material here. I'm going to add in a new image texture as well. We'll hit new, 1024, it should be totally fine. And we'll just call this fall off and then hit new image. And then we're going to use this as our alpha channel. So plug that into our alpha. But since it's completely black right now, it's going to make everything completely invisible. Now, if we go over to our texture paint node, using fall off as our painting that we basically want to do, all I need to do is remove all our brushes. So we're going to remove our mask as well as our textured one. And we can paint in this with some fall off. And that's just going to create a matte. So I'll do image, save, and then let's go ahead and save this as a material. So we'll just save that as a fall off material. And then go back over to our layout. So now we've got ourselves a plane with a black and white image for the alpha. And if we use a curve adjustment, that'll actually, I think, control the amount of fall off that we're actually having there. But yeah, now we're getting our shadow. It's just a little bit of a shadow, honestly. And then all we have to do is throw that inside of our lighting tab there, so that way it's not appearing. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and render this out, and then we got some compositing to do. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and open up Nuke. Okay, so let's go ahead and import this EXR file now, and we'll just use a shuffle node, so that way we can view the combined image. This is the correct image for what we're trying to do here. I'm just gonna make sure it's tagged as ACES CG. Now there's a few things that I'm gonna want to do here. First of all, are we even using depth of field? Yes, we are. Let's do a couple things. Firstly, we're just gonna throw a glow in. I think glows can be nice. We'll probably just increase the tolerance first of all, and let's do effect only just so we can see what we're doing here. Just change the brightness here to be 0.75, and then our saturation, we'll just move that down as well. I'm going to merge this back on top of everything here. Just use a plus for that. That's just going to add a little bit of glow on the inside of like all of this area right here. I think let's just make some adjustments to this. The tolerance here, let's just make that decently small. And then the brightness, we'll change that to, I don't know, half. And then the saturation is also about half as well. So that's going to kind of just like give like an overall glow to like pretty much everything. I'll want to change the size here. I guess about 15, 17 should be fine. Add another glow in. And then this tolerance, we can just set this to like a 0.5. And then of course with the brightness, let's just set that to like 0.7. That should be fine. Saturation probably also about 0.7-ish. And then if we use effect only for that, just trying to create like an overall like chromatic aberration like type effect. Just use another plus here. It's just going to kind of like add an overall kind of like schema to it. Let's merge this back here at like a 0.4. And then let's take this, let's screen it instead of plussing it. Okay, that works for me. And I think that's pretty nice because that just adds a nice little bit of bloom to everything. I just want to add a bit of contrast to our image here. And then let's add in, eventually we're going to add in our lens distortion here. So let's re-distort this. I think overall we're also going to want to add in another grade node here. Let's use a crypto matte. Just blur that a bit more. I mean, I could have probably just drew a roto shape honestly for that as well. Just create a bit of a shape. I want to blur this quite a bit. I'll probably keep that there and then just kind of get rid of this more so for just a bit vignette-y. Have that go off a bit. Let's bring back that down a little bit. And then another thing I like to do every now and then is just take a blur node and then blur this by like 500%. That's going to find really just the highlights. If we do like a 300, or in this case we might want to do a 100. And then we take that, we merge it back over top of our original image, and we do a plus. And then we set this to like a really small value, and it's just going to kind of like add an overall brightness to everything that it needs to be blown out. It's pretty sweet. I'm not really a fan of this number here. You might want to take a look at that. I mean, we could also just blur everything. I feel like I want to blur this, but not fully. I mean, let's just take a look at this. Let's do 0.1. That's good. And I want the sky to be darker. Let's look at crypto mats real quick. If I select the wall, let's just select that as well. Didn't really want to select the fog because I kind of wanted to darken it. So let's close that now. And then let's use a roto on our original image here. And we're just going to roto out kind of like this whole area. Keep that as like an RGBA. And what I really want to do is go look at this roto paint area. Let's add an exposure node in. I really want this sky to be a little bit more blown out. And I wasn't able to do that in 3D, but I can do that decently simple here. So I have our roto node that we have, and I basically want to subtract the areas where the crypto mat is. So if I do a merge node here after our roto, and then I use this mask, and then I'm just going to say invert, what that's going to give us is basically just the sky area. And now if I go back over to our exposure node, I'm just going to plug that into our merge, and I can increase the kind of like overall exposure of this sky. And when that does that, I'm going to kind of need to feather these edges a little bit more. So let's use an edge blur here, and let's just pull back this exposure now just a little bit. You have to be careful with crunching this wall a little bit too much. I might add a little bit more kind of like smoke into this, or not smoke, but I just want to add some more detailed smoke. I think we lost quite a bit of this inside of our render as it stands. So if we go over, I'm just going to drag in some of our evaporating fog that we had. Set this as our utility texture. Let's use this guy. I'm going to actually add another just real quick trick. Boom. And then we'll set that to red. Now we've got this guy and we can scale him to wherever we need him. So that's a little bit of smoke there. And honestly, we'll probably add in a little bit more. I think that's pretty nice. Let's copy this. Let's paste it. Let's use a time offset. And we'll do a time offset of like 500. And then let's use another merge node here. Even though actually we probably could do this all in the same merge node. So we'll do A2 now. And then this we'll just move him over to something like that. Okay, so yeah, a little bit of smoke coming in from there. I think another thing we could do is with this smoke, just add a little grade node in, and then that way we can make this whatever color we want. Just a little bit of blue, you know, just like a nice little blue glowy smoke. What does a postage stamp do? Oh, it allows me to see the crypto mat. Learn something new every day. You connect it to the EXR input and then to the crypto mat input. Okay. It reroutes, but it's cleaner than just using a null, especially if you hide the input of it. Oh, and then you hide the input here. I do think I want to have some kind of like a green glow that's happening. So let's move all of that down. Let's add in a dot. Let's do that. We'll pre-multiply that and then add in a blur node and set that to like 100. And then we'll just grade this to be a little more green. And then maybe a little darker as well. I'm not a fan of this part of the wall here. I know we could probably use like a grade node with like a crypto mat. And just kind of bring down the wall a little bit. Let's just blur this also. I think that's going to keep the detail a little bit more inside of our wall rather than blowing it out too much. Let's see. Let's take a look at our big old glow here. I think I'm fine with that now being a little bit more because it's not blowing this out as much. And then we're still keeping all of that detail there. But yeah, I think that's going to be the render. Also, join our Discord. We have a link in the description of our Discord. Share your own artwork, things that you guys are working on. I'd love to see it. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining. You guys have a good one.